I often get questions from people who feel like they're sitting on the sidelines watching their friend or loved one, family member in a toxic relationship, and they want to help, but they feel powerless. If you are in this situation right now, or if you've ever been in this situation, this video is for you. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we talk about emotional abuse, self-development, and sometimes we sprinkle in a little bit about spirituality. If those are topics that have touched your life, consider subscribing because you're going to find a whole lot of content like that here. And don't forget to hit that bell icon so you can be notified whenever I post new content. This way you won't miss a video. So today we're talking about what you can do when you have a friend or family member, a loved one, who's in a toxic relationship. And this is such a difficult place to be. And I know because I've been there and I've been on the other side too. So I wanted to put together some tips to help those of you who have asked me this question. Before I do, I want to be very clear that the type of relationship that I'm talking about, this toxic relationship, is a potentially emotionally abusive relationship. And we're not talking about anyone who is in any sort of physical danger. So these tips apply to helping a friend who is maybe in a relationship with a narcissist or somebody else who is manipulative or emotionally abusive to them. All right, so let's get to it. The first tip that I have is to show that you are supportive, that you are on their side. Now, I know this seems like it goes without saying, right? But I feel like a lot of people have good intentions, but they get it wrong because it's easy to get frustrated when you see your friend returning to a toxic relationship or a person who's been toxic to their lives. You know this isn't good for them. Maybe you've talked to them about it and they know that it's not good for them, but yet they keep going back. So if you do truly want to help them and show support, try to avoid saying things like, I don't want to hear it anymore, or it's your own fault for going back to that person. Try to think about how your words might impact this person who's in a tricky situation, a difficult situation. So saying, I don't want to hear it anymore is understandable from your perspective, that you don't want to hear it anymore because there's nothing you can do. But it can also make that person feel even more isolated than they already do. So it's always going to be your personal choice in how you handle your relationships. And I'm not telling you what to do, but having been there and having been on the other side, I'm just sharing the things that would have been helpful to me and some things that were actually helpful to me. So the second tip I have for you is to educate yourself on emotional abuse. Now, one of the frustrations that I hear often, that I've heard often, and I've even felt it when I was on the other side of this, is that somebody keeps going back to somebody who is emotionally abusive to them. And having been through it myself and learning about it later, I learned that there are reasons why this happened, that it wasn't because I was emotionally weak. There's something called the trauma bond that can be extremely strong. And it can get somebody to really defy all logic and reason and go back to an abusive person. And if you want to learn more about that, I will link to a video below. You can watch that video, you can Google the term, but I suggest that you do research what it is like to be in an emotionally abusive relationship and how it impacts a person emotionally. If you haven't been there and you don't know, I strongly suggest doing some research. And if you're here watching this video, you might already be doing that. So the third tip I have, if you want to be helpful to somebody who is in a toxic relationship, is to be careful what you say to other people about this relationship. I think sometimes people talk about these things with good intentions. They talk about it maybe to get somebody else's perspective and insight, maybe to unload because it's taking an emotional toll on you. But do understand that every time you involve someone else, there is potential that that person will go back and talk to the person who's in that relationship with all the best intentions and wanting to help. And if that toxic relationship involves gaslighting, what that might do is reinforce the story that the abuser is telling that person, that everyone is against you. See, these people are out there, they're talking about you. They don't have your best interests at heart. They don't understand our relationship. And, they're getting involved and it's none of their business. And blah, blah, blah. Whatever story it is that the abuser is telling this person, your loved one, be careful about reinforcing it. So the next tip I have is to be careful how you talk about the other person, especially when they're on a break or in a fight. This is something that I've always had to remind myself of when talking to someone who is in a toxic relationship, a friend or a family member, something I really care about. I've always had to remind myself that there is a good chance that this person will come back around again. And you don't want to be in that awkward position where you have completely and freely spoken your mind and said everything you felt you needed to say, even some things that were not very nice. And now this person is there again in your face. Once those words are out there, you can't take them back. And it's not always about how that other person that you were talking about might feel, because you probably don't care about that. But again, you could be reinforcing the gaslighting that's going on there. You don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's usually best to stay neutral and supportive. So my next tip covers an alternative to speaking your mind freely and possibly even trash talking the other person. So if they do come to you and they want support and they want your perspective, consider asking what you can do to help them. Just ask them, what can I do to support you? I see you struggling. What can I do to help support you? Again, it's a great time to reinforce that you are on their side. I'm here for you and I want to support you. How can I help? So those are some tips and some insights that I wanted to share from having been on both sides of this equation. It's a really difficult place to be. And you want to just shake the person and say, listen, this is what's going on. This other person, they're not going to change. Get out now. But that sort of change has to come from within the person. We can make little suggestions here and there, but as a friend, as a family member, from my experience, it's usually best to tread lightly unless this person has openly talked about this and is asking for your input. So again, some tips and some insight from somebody who's been there, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow these tips. This is your life. This is your loved one. It's your relationship with them. You may know what's best for that relationship, for your relationship with that person. But before you do anything or say anything, just make sure you're keeping that relationship in mind. Even if you think you know best, or if you know what's best for this person and the best course of action for them to take with this relationship, with this person who's toxic to them, it's not your decision to make. And it is possible to cause irreparable damage to your relationship with that person by overstepping those boundaries. So whatever you do decide to do, please keep those boundaries in mind. So I hope you found this video helpful. I wish there was more that I could say, that there was more that I could do to help in these situations. But ultimately, change has to come from within, and that person has to be ready to change. And if any of you out there have been through this yourself and have some tips for other people who are struggling with it right now, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you did find this video helpful, go ahead and hit that like button, and I will see you next week.